Robinson. Welcome to today's Facebook Live. No surprise, today I'm going to talk about stencils again. Hope you're not getting sick of them. Hope everyone is also having a very good holiday weekend. It's very nice here in Pennsylvania. Hopefully it doesn't get too noisy outside, because as soon as it gets nice, everyone in town is cutting their grass. Except us. So today, what I want to do is I'm going to use the same stencil that I used on my last live, and it is this stencil. It's very simple, and I showed you how to kind of make the stencil, and not just this one, but any one, how you can make it fit into a block, or maybe a block that the stencil's too big for. So today I thought, if I show you a block, more than likely if you use a stencil in a block, you're going to want to make that coordinate with your border. So I thought today I'll show you a little bit about how you can use a stencil on a border. So I've marked out some, like a bigger border and even a sashing area, because you might have a sashing in your quilt that you would, generally you want to try to get all of your designs within the quilt to coordinate somehow. So let me turn this down here to my fabric. Can you see this one? Yeah? Okay. So in this bigger border, and I did mark as big as this particular one, as big as the stencil, because I want you to see, obviously, the obvious choice would be, hopefully, that your stencil fits right in there. And I know it's hard for you to see it, but the points actually are right on the edges of the border. So if that's what you want to do, you can just mark it out there. And then the only tricky part is making sure that you have the points lined up. Oh gosh, I guess if I put my glasses on, I'll be able to see it. Get that one lined up right next to it. Do you have to make them touch? You really don't, if that's not what you want to do. But for this one, I'll do that. So that's kind of, lucky if you pick a stencil that absolutely positively just fits right in there. If not, if you missed the first live that I did, if you go back and watch that, we pulled out these points to make them fit in a block, and you can do the same thing in a border. It really is no different. So once you've marked that, sure, you could just quilt what you see, but you may not like how big and open this is. So what I would probably do, if I chose to quilt actually this, exactly what is marked, I would probably add a fill in here to make these stand out a little more. Or you could even add some additional lines in here. We have so many points in this stencil. Maybe after you had quilted this design, you could go back and use a ruler and just stitch from this point to this point to this point, and you could do it down here. I probably can draw that for you. So like you could stitch from here to here, and it would still be continuous. And then just work your way over to the next one. And then maybe you still want to add some fill. For me, I would probably put something in here, because then these would be an area of relief, and also these long kind of diamonds in there. So then, let's see what happens. This one is in there, or I can move it, the fabric. So now clearly this one's smaller, so this is not gonna fit. It's way too big. So, you have some options. You could, I guess, half of it fits. So we could do that. So the thing about it is, whatever you did with your block, as long as you use some element from this stencil, it doesn't have to be exactly the same design. It's still gonna bring it all together and make it really cohesive. So I'm gonna go ahead and mark this just half. And then I'd slide it down here. lining up my point, and then see if I'm on there. And I am. So this one, and you would continue down your border, but with this one, now we really have a lot of open space in here, and you could use this. My husband's standing over there telling me what I should do with it. No, that's what I'm gonna do. Stop. Okay, so you've been listening. Yeah, so you could leave this open, and if you were gonna leave it open, you need to add some other element. That's just way too much unquilted. If you have like a set of circle templates, that would be really neat to mark like a circle behind each one, or you could even mark it behind here, and it would be flowing like behind that shape to make it fill the border better. But the easiest way probably would be to just stitch this and then be able to come back this way and put one in between every other one. And of course it would be here too. Oh, gosh, I can't see it, there's too many lines there. There we go. But again, you know, even with doing that, we still have these, and that's, I mean, depending on the density of the rest of your quilt, this might be a little too much open. So my first, I think the obvious thing would be that you could put a fill in there, but maybe you don't want that much quilting. I mean, if that's the case, what I would probably do is just use a ruler, and I would come down back through, and that's enough to break that up so that this piece right here isn't just so not quilted. But you know, if you were going to quilt just exactly what these lines are, maybe you used feathers in your quilt somewhere, you could come back and maybe you do feathers in here, because that would be pretty too. And they could flow right through the border. And then the next one would just travel right down there. So, I mean, the option, there's so many options when you talk about stencils, if you just mark different things and play around with them. So then let's talk about this tiny little one. You know, maybe you have a sashing in your quilt or a teeny tiny little border. This, I mean, clearly half is way too big. Gosh, I can't even see where that is. Half is too big. We could do this. We could do half of it this way, and that actually does fit. Let me mark one so you can see that. So that would work too. And they would just meet one after another. But I think I would probably choose to do that. To me, I don't know if I like that. I would probably use just this. Because even if you did a block with this whole star shape, just because you use a part of it, it would still make it match. And then you can just mark one after another. Because sometimes, especially if it were a sashing, you don't necessarily, most of the quilts that I get in from people with the sashings are usually tend to be really a print busy fabric, and that would be easy to stitch, and especially if it were a busy fabric that you're not really going to see what you did. So there's, I mean, the options are just endless really. So those are some ideas for how to make that one stencil fit in there multiple different ways, and depending on the size of your border. But I don't think we can talk about borders without talking about the corners, because this is all great, but you know, and these fit in here great, but what happens when we get to the corner? Because maybe the borders, you know, whatever the measurement is, that stencil isn't gonna fit, you know, perfectly. And, you know, here it's not like you can just use half. So let me show you. I mean, there are a lot of different ways you can do that. You can measure out, but I usually like to take the easy way out. And this is what I do most of the time. So if I have this quilt and this border is, I think I marked it at 6 inches. And I know now, and I know that, see, this fits in there great. But the measurement of the quilt was too big and it wasn't gonna fit evenly. So generally, I just don't do anything with the corner because it's not gonna fit. So I don't want to end up with like half of one, and you can't really just cut one off when you get towards that. So I like to just let this go. I'll worry about this later. And I start from this, you know, in a quilt, this would probably be a seam. Not that that matters. If it's not, you can see I marked a line here, and I also marked a diagonal for later, in case I need it. So then I start right at these lines from all 4 corners, and I start marking the stencil. So I mark this one in, this one, and then I'm gonna mark from the other corner, which will be coming from the left side of the quilt, in. So I'm gonna end up in the center. Can you see this part too on there? I shouldn't have made it so long, sorry. So I keep marking them in from both sides. And then when I get to the point, see this, another one doesn't fit, and I'm just gonna stop. So now I have this oddball shape here, and I'd have my corner. We're gonna pretend it's a little mini wall hanging. So now, my favorite thing to do is just make something here and here that makes these designs so that this looks like it goes behind these designs. But it also acts as like a connector. It brings them all together. They look like they're all hooked to this same thing. And not all quilts are even width and length. So this empty space on the sides may be bigger, but that's okay because it's gonna have the same element here. And my favorite thing to do, so I have my diagonal line there, and you would wanna measure it. Measure down and see where the halfway point is, and it's right there. I put that little dot there. Then I usually will just grab my a piecing, you know, cutting ruler, because then I can use the markings on here to line up, and I know that that's going to be the center of both. And actually on this one, this stencil is nice because it has these points. So I can carry that through by lining up on the points. There. And then it would be here. And then, so now we have a center point that you can put whatever you want on that. Maybe you love to do like, the little string of pearls. You could use a circle thing and put little circles on here. Maybe you did feathers in this quilt and you want to put feathers along these lines because they're gonna, you know, you'd stop at each design and it's gonna look like it's behind there. And you don't necessarily have to put it in this one. You may be doing something different in there. But I usually like to stick with just lines because to me, this is kind of the fancy part of the design. So what I have in the center and in the corner, I want to really look like it brings it all together. So I like it to be kind of plain. So I have a bunch of these different rulers, and you can use any ruler. It could be this one. Now that I have a center line, I can just lay this down. I guess if and then I can just mark both sides of this to make it bigger. So I would probably just leave this the lines. I really like that. I think it's really neat and clean, and it doesn't distract. It unifies everything, but it doesn't distract from the main design in the border. And, you know, and if you don't, I would probably actually do a few more lines. I might do a smaller line in here, maybe around the outside, like a 1/4 inch here, just to make those really stand out a little more. And really, if you're gonna stitch, if you did the lines and you're gonna stitch it with a ruler, you wouldn't even need to mark these 1/4 inch, because you could do that using the edge of the ruler. But maybe you don't like lines and you don't want it to be so plain, then you could do, well, we use the feathers because I've already used that example the whole time. Now we mark 2 different things. You don't have to stitch these outside lines, but you have your spine, and you could use that as your kind of boundary, so you know where to stop those feathers so that they all stay the same size. And you just go the whole way around. So I hope that makes sense. And then in this center section, we would have this same thing. So it just brings it all together. It makes it a lot easier. Instead of trying to find a particular stencil that's exactly going to fit where you need it to be. So I hope that that's useful to you in some way. Because I know it can be, I think borders are kind of hard to figure out, you know, even if you're doing something freehand, it doesn't always fit evenly. And so this is a really easy way, even not necessarily with a stencil. You could be using templates or something like that, and this is an easy way to bring it all together. So I hope you can find that useful, and I hope you all have a great holiday weekend, and I'll see you again. Bye.